Good evening. It is so exciting to get to speak before you tonight. I always love whenever an opportunity comes about like this. And tonight you get me because my grandpa is over at his house, unable to move because of his back. And if you ask my grandma, it's probably because of something that she told him not to do. But you get the younger Williams with the better, stronger back, I will say. And this morning, my grandpa, I would say, kind of played a practical joke on me by making me read Romans 6, verses 6 through 16, when all he really needed was Romans 6, verse 16. So we're just going to continue that trend, and we're going to talk about Matthew 1 tonight. I'm just going to see how many names I can read. I'm just kidding. We're not actually going to read a bunch of names. But tonight we're going to talk about strength. And I just finished writing the youth rally and getting everything set up, and we're very close to getting the flyer done and getting it all ready to go out. But tonight we're going to do just a little sneak peek of it. But before that, I just want to encourage you to come to the youth rally. This year's theme is, in a world where you can be anything, be. And then every lesson after that's going to finish that statement and talk about, as Christians, in a world filled with so much chaos and everything going wrong, what are things that we should be? And it all comes from a saying, in a world where you can be anything, be kind. But as Christians, there's so many things that we need to be. I'm a little biased, but I think each lesson is very good and serves a good purpose. But I can unbiasedly tell you that we have an amazing lineup of speakers that you should definitely come here, and also me. But tonight we're going to talk about, in a world where you can be anything, be strong. And this is something that I find so important, and it was an honorable mention for our youth rally, so I'm not stealing anybody's lesson, but I find it so important because we live in a world of people that are weak. We live in a world where people get blown over, they get pushed over by just the slightest problem, by just the slightest breeze. Somebody will fall over. We live in a very weak world. And I think that goes both ways. We live in a weak world physically, but more importantly, we live in a weak world spiritually. And as Christians, we need to be the thing that goes against the grain. We need to be the person that in a weak world, we stand up and you say, I'm strong. I stand for something and I will stand by it. Right? We need to be that little bit of strength to when something tough comes, whenever somebody challenges us, we don't just lay down and say, you know what, you're right, go along your way. We say, no, this is what I believe, and this is why I believe it. And so tonight we're going to talk about why we should be strong. Is where we're going to start. Then we're going to talk about how do I get strong. And then we're going to finish the lesson with what do I do with my strength, right? And so to start, the first logical question for us is, why be strong at all? What benefit is there to me being strong, right? We ask ourselves this physically. Why do I need to be a strong person? Why do I need to exercise? Why do I need to have these muscles? Well, one, you have to be strong enough just to live. Your muscles are what brings you through each day. But I will tell you that if you are stronger and physically fit, I would say your life will be even better. But more importantly, spiritually, we have to be strong. And so I want to start by reading 1 Corinthians 15:58. And the first point of why we should be strong, it's pretty simple. It's a commandment of God. God commands us to be a strong people. In 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 58, it says, Therefore, my beloved brethren, be ye steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, for as much as ye know that your labor is not in vain in the Lord. This verse tells us that we need to be unmovable, right? If I walked over to Tegan and tried to push him over, it'd be pretty easy because he's not as strong as me. I'm stronger, so I can push him over pretty easily. But if I walked over to J.J. Mygett and he was standing there ready for it and I tried to push him over, I'm going to have a harder time because he's stronger. He's stronger than me and he's stronger than Tegan, so he would be unmovable. But if we're not strong, whenever something comes our way, we're just going to fall by the wayside. We're going to let that roll us over and not have any strength to just stand. And this is a commandment that God has given us. He wants us to be unmovable. It's not a suggestion. It's not, maybe you should be unmovable. Maybe you should stand for your faith. It is, be unmovable. Be steadfast. There's no question of what the commandment is. And then another reason that we should be strong is because we have God behind us. And I want to share a story with you that my dad shared in his Wednesday night class. And then, since I'm not in that class, Alicia relayed it to me whenever I needed a little bit of help. And the story goes that one day, a dad was walking with his little girl. And they were walking through the woods, and the trees had little sticks that had fallen down. And the little girl loved to walk, and as she'd walk by, if there was one in her way, she'd grab it and throw it out of the way. And then she'd keep walking, and another one would come, she'd grab it and throw it out of her way. She just loved to do that. And she was walking along the way, and eventually a branch was in front of them. And she looked at her dad, she goes, "Dad, can I move it? Dad, can I move it?" And the dad goes, "Yeah, move it, but use all of your strength." And the little girl goes, okay, she's excited. This is the biggest branch. She's going to move this. It's going to be awesome. And she goes to pick it up, and she tries really hard, and it doesn't move. And she looks at her dad, and she goes, "Can I move this?" And the dad goes, "Yeah, use all of your strength." Little girl goes, "Okay, I got this. I'm really going to squeeze my muscles really hard. I'm going to give everything I got, and I'm going to move this branch." And she does it, and the branch still doesn't move. And at this point, she's annoyed, and she turns back to her dad and goes, "Dad, I can't move it." And the dad goes, "Yes, you can. Use all of your strength." So the little girl says, "Okay, I'm going to try one more time." She goes to pick up that branch. She tries as hard as possible to pick that branch up, but it doesn't move. At this point, she turns back to her dad, extremely frustrated why he ever told her that she could move that branch when he knew she couldn't. And he looks at her and he says, "You didn't use all your strength." And she says, "Yes, I did. I squeezed my muscles as hard as I could, and I gave everything I had." And the dad goes, "No. You forgot the one thing that gave you the most strength. You never asked me for help." And the little girl just kind of looks at him. And then the two walk over to the branch, and with the dad's help, the little girl picks up the branch and moves it out of their way. And they continue walking. And the same concept applies to our lives. As Christians, whenever we're walking down that path, or whenever we're walking in our life, things are going to fall in front of us, and we'll be able to toss it out of the way. That's not a big deal. That was tough, but I could still do it. But sometime there's going to be something in your way that you can't move by yourself. There's going to be something in your way like that branch that will not move no matter how hard you try by yourself. But God looks at us and He says, "Use all your strength." And the moment that we look back at God and we say, "You're right. Help me. Help me with your strength. Help me move this out of my way," it'll move away so easily like that branch did when the dad helped the little girl. And this isn't just a story. It has a biblical backing. If we turn to Romans 8, and we'll read verses 31 and then 37. Romans 8:31 says, "What shall we then say to these things? If God be for us, who can be against us?" And then if we skip down to verse 37, it says, "Nay, in all these things we are more than conquerors through Him that loved us." We're more than conquerors. We're super conquerors. We are superheroes with God behind us. With His strength, we can accomplish anything. And we see that in Philippians 4, verse 13. Philippians 4, verse 13 is a verse that so many could quote, but it says, "I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me." Like that little girl, we may not have the strength to move that branch on our own, and that's going to happen a whole lot. But the moment that we realize that our greatest strength, our greatest ability is to ask God, the God who is all-powerful, the God that created everything, the God that conquers over everything. Once we realize we have Him on our side and we say, "God, I need your help with this," we have the strength to do anything we want. We can be super conquerors. We can overcome anything that's in our way. We're unstoppable. And now, the final reason why we should be strong Because God created us to be strong. He didn't create us to be weak. Turn to 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7. This verse is one of my favorite in the entire Bible. It's one of my favorite verses just to read whenever I'm feeling down, whenever I'm struggling. Read this verse, and I will guarantee, at least for me, it'll pick you up. 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7 says, "For God hath not made us in the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind." God didn't create us to be weak. He didn't create us as a weak being that could be rolled over by anything. He didn't create us to be blown away. God created us strong. He gave us a spirit of power, not a spirit of fear. And so often we forget that. We say, I'm weak. I can't do this. And then sometimes we need God's help, but too often we discount ourselves. We were created with a spirit of power to go out and be strong. And if God created me to be powerful, if God created me with a spirit of power, who am I to tell God that I can't be powerful? Who am I to say, I know you created me this way, but I'm going to be weak? Who am I to tell God how His creation should act? So now we know why we should be strong, why it's important to have that strength. But the next logical question would be, how do I get strong? And the first thing that I would tell you is that you got to trust in God. We just saw that whenever we talked about the little girl. That's where our strength comes from. Our spiritual strength comes from God being behind us and supporting us. So if we forget to trust in God, we have no strength. We can't build ourselves up without God behind us to help us. And if you turn to 2 Corinthians 12, verses 9 through 10, it tells us why we trust that God will strengthen us. Second Corinthians 12, verses 9 and 10, beginning in verse 9, says, "And he said unto me, My grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, will I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Therefore I take pleasure in infirmities, and reproaches, and necessities, and persecution, and distresses for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then am I strong." Whenever we're at our weakest point, whenever we feel like we're at a breaking point and we can't handle anything else, that's when God comes in and He says, "Let me show you what I can do. Let me show you the strength that I have. Let me help you." I don't know how many of you work out or how many of you try to build muscle, but whenever you're working out, that muscle gain really comes on those last few reps when you're struggling to do anything. Whenever you're doing something that is easy for you, whenever you're doing something that isn't challenging, you're not getting any stronger. You're not getting any better. But it's at that moment where you feel like you can't do any more that you get a little bit stronger. And it's the same thing in our Christian living. When we feel like we can't do any more, when we feel like we're the weakest, that's when God says, "Let me show you the power that I have. Let me show you that you can do all things through me, because I'll give you your strength." And that is such a beautiful thing to keep in mind, because when we're at our weakest, we are actually our strongest. And the second thing that we need to do to get strong is to study, right? If you're trying to build muscle, if you're trying to work out, but you never go work out, you never go for a run, you're never going to put on any muscle. You're never going to get any better. And the amazing thing is muscle actually begins to atrophy or actually becomes weaker after only 3 days of not doing anything. After 3 days of not working out, of not using your muscles begin to atrophy, which means to just lose their ability to work, right? Our faith is the exact same way. If we're not studying, if we're not pushing ourselves every single day, just a few days, we begin to fall away. Wednesday night in the class, we were talking about why Wednesday night services were so important. I told I told the kids, I go, I know you probably don't understand this because you've never been here, but Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday afternoon, holy mackerel, those can be some of the hardest days ever. You can come to church on Sunday and you can feel strong. You're like, I'm ready to go get this world. I'm ready to attack it. And then by Wednesday night, you're like, oh my goodness, I don't think I can take any more. I don't think that I can do anything else. But then you come to church and you're here and you have people that are here and say, I got you. Let me help you. We feel that spiritual atrophy happen to us in just a few short days. And studying is the one way to keep ourselves strong. If we turn to 2 Timothy 2:15, 2 Timothy 2 verse 15 says, Study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. We must work on our spiritual strength every day. We must work on ourselves spiritually every day, just like we would if we were trying to get in shape or get more muscle. Our spiritual health, our spiritual strength needs that exercise. It needs to be challenged. It needs to study. It needs to get better. And the last reason, or the last way that I think we can get strong, and one of the ways that is so often discounted, is by surrounding ourselves with others that want to make us strong. If you'll turn to Proverbs 27, verse 17. Proverbs 27, verse 17 is one of the most beautiful verses in the Bible. It says, Iron sharpeneth iron, so a man sharpeneth the countenance of his friend. If we're that iron to each other, we'll help grow each other. If you try to sharpen iron with a piece of paper, it's just going to get cut. It's not going to do any benefit. Even if you try to use a weaker metal and you use a foil, an aluminum foil, and try to sharpen it, it's not going to do anything to that iron. But whenever you have somebody else that's by you, and you're that iron, and they're that iron, and you're using each other to sharpen one another, that's when you really become sharper. That's whenever growth happens. And then another verse is 1 Corinthians 15, verse 33. 1 Corinthians 15, verse 33 says, Be not deceived. Evil communications corrupt good manner. I think that this point of surrounding ourselves with people who want to get stronger is forgotten. We say that I trust in God, I trust that He'll strengthen me, and I may even get a daily Bible verse sent to my phone, but then I go and hang out with people that don't want to get stronger, that don't want to spiritually grow. I hang around people that are constantly tearing me down. Now, to go back to working out, have you ever tried to work out by yourself? To have no one else to do it with and just go at it by yourself? It's terrible. It's hard because you have nobody there to build you up, to hold you accountable, to say, no, you got this. Whenever you don't want to work out, they're like, no, you should do this. Remember what you're going for. But have you ever tried to work out while somebody else doesn't want to work out? Whenever somebody else is like, we could work out. Or we could sit on the couch and eat cake and ice cream. Also a good idea. Whenever you have somebody like that, that makes working out by yourself look easy. Because now somebody's trying to pull you down and say, you know what, I know you really want to do that, but we should really do this instead. Look how good this looks. And we're really easily convinced that we don't need to work out, right? And it's the same thing in our Christian life. It's hard enough to go through this life by yourself. I would say it's near impossible. But to go through this Christian life with people trying to pull you down, with people trying to say, I know you're trying to study every day, I know you're trying to be strong, but maybe instead of studying, we could, we'll go watch the movie. Or maybe instead of going to church, I got tickets to a hockey game. We could go there instead. That is impossible to do if that's the only people you surround yourself with. And if you look at bodybuilders, or if you look at somebody that is fit, and you look around at the people that they hang around with, I will almost guarantee you that most of their friends, if not all of their friends, are also athletically fit. And that is the same thing in our Christian life. If we surround ourselves with people that aren't trying to get stronger, that aren't trying to build us up, that are trying to tear us down, we're going to end up like them. But if we surround ourselves with people in this congregation, if we surround ourselves with people that are eager to go out and get stronger, you're going to be amazed at the things that you can do, at the strength that you will gain. Because when you have somebody there working alongside you, whenever you have somebody there pushing you along, it is amazing the things that we can accomplish. Somebody there to hold you accountable, somebody there to encourage you, and you will do amazing things. So now we know why we need strength. And we know how we're going to get our strength. But now the question is, what do I do with this strength? If I was the strongest person ever, amazing muscles, but I couldn't open a pickle jar for my wife, I'd be useless. If I couldn't do the things with those muscles, I'm useless. Right? Somebody doesn't train just to train. They train for a purpose. If I'm going to go running, the odds of me actually sticking to running with no 5K or 10K or whatever in mind, I'm going to run maybe once. And I tell you that from experience. But whenever we are using our strength, that's when it's most useful. We could be the strongest Christian ever. We could know all the Bible verses. We could tell you anything you want to know. But if something comes along and we just roll over and say, you know what? Every person has the right to think on their own, to have their own opinion. We're really not that strong. And I want to read from Romans 15, verse 1. And this is the first way that I think that we can use our strength. And that is to build people that are weaker than us up. Romans 15, verse 1 says, When then that are strong ought to bear the infirmities of the weak, and not to please ourselves. Whenever we have this strength, whenever we're strong in our Christianity, we need to help those that are weaker. We need to help those that can't do it by themselves. Or maybe they're just beginning and trying to get stronger. If you're trying to train for something, odds are you're going to try to find a trainer. And that trainer is going to be stronger than you, or else you wouldn't use them. Right? If I go to somebody and I ask Tegan to be my trainer, it's really not going to get me anywhere because I know what I need to do better than Tegan does. But if I went to Robbie and said, all right, I need to get muscle, Robbie would be like, all right, listen, this is what you got to do. And it's the same thing in our Christianity. If we're the strong ones sitting there and we don't ever offer help, if we don't ever try to train the other people to help them, then we're not helping anybody. We're useless. We're just sitting on the sideline watching everybody. And the second reason why we need to have strength, or what we use our strength for, is to stand firm in our faith. And this one is the most important part. 1 Corinthians 15:58. We read it before, and it says, Therefore, my beloved brethren, be ye steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the works of the Lord, for as much as ye know that your labor is not in vain in the Lord. We need to use our strength to stand against the world that wants to push us over and tell us that we can't really believe in that Bible. You can't really think that's literal. You can't think that's real. And they want to tell us that we're wrong. My grandpa this morning, whenever talking in his lesson, he mentioned that the Church of Christ used to be known as people that would stand up for what they believed in. And then he followed that up by saying, but sadly, many now struggle to do that. We struggle to stand up and say, you know what? I know the truth, and I can help you find it. If I know how to save somebody, if I know what they need to do, but I keep my mouth shut the entire time, my strength is useless. If I'm not willing to stand firm, if I'm not willing to be there and be steadfast whenever people question the truth, whenever people attack the church, then my spiritual strength is useless. It has no purpose. And whenever you don't use your spiritual strength, it's going to go away. The saying of use it or lose it applies to our spiritual life as well. If we're not using that spiritual strength, if we're not standing for what's right, if we're not preparing ourselves by studying, if we're not doing these things to make sure that we're the strongest we can possibly be, you're going to quickly find yourself much weaker than you were before. And you're going to find yourself weaker whenever you fall. But it doesn't have to be that way. We can build ourselves up, and then once we get there, we can use that strength to stand for what's right. We can use that strength to build others up, and in return, continue to build ourselves up. And so, tonight, I hope that you're a little bit more motivated. A little motivated to just be a little bit stronger in your Christianity. Every day to grow 1% stronger in your Christianity. But tonight, we also take this time to offer help to other people. Tonight, you may have let your spiritual strength atrophy a little bit or decrease just a little bit. You may just be feeling weak and feeling like you can't do anything. But like we talked about earlier, when you're at your weakest, that's when God shines the best. That's whenever God can come in. That's whenever your fellow brothers and sisters in Christ can come in and help you get that strength back. And that's what we're here to do tonight. Or maybe tonight you're ready to be baptized into Christ. You're ready to take that step forward and to become a child of God, to truly become strong. Because until you are a Christian, until you're a child of God, you can't be the strongest. And your strength isn't really doing anything until you've put your Lord on in baptism. If there's any needs of the congregation, please come forward as we stand and sing. Restore my spirit, Lord.